John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife and her sister took off from Caldwell, New Jersey, a small place not far from New York City, about 8:30 Eastern Time last night. While no flight plan was filed, none had to be under the circumstances of this flight, they were bound for Martha's Vineyard. The plane was due there about 10 o'clock, never got there. Radar contact is believed to have been made just after 9:30, believed to have been made about 17 miles west of Martha's Vineyard in that Gay Head area, and the aircraft was believed at that time to be down to about 2,000 feet. Footnote, bottom of the page, reminding again that there are two eye and ear witnesses who say that they saw and heard a small plane 20 to 50 or 60 feet off the water at about that time, that is 9:30 to 9:45. The plane is now 19 hours overdue. No sign of the aircraft, no sign of the people who were aboard the plane. There were some early unconfirmed reports of a beep possibly coming from some emergency beacon. It was never confirmed. The Coast Guard checked it out, no later word. And so at this point, the belief runs strong that there has been no emergency signal of any kind received from the aircraft, now 19 hours overdue. And if you're asking yourself the question, well, did they ever contact the Martha's Vineyard Airport tower? The answer is no. There was no contact there. There's a belief that there was a sighting on radar. The investigators are checking all of this out, of course, at about 9:30, a few minutes past the 9:30 point. The news conference in Boston, this is to be another Coast Guard news conference to bring you up to date on the official information they intend to pass along, is beginning to take shape. And let's go to that right now.
The Admiral will have about 10 minutes to answer questions after the summary. When you are asking your questions, please identify yourself and your organization so that if we cannot answer your question on the spot, we can get that information back to you as soon as possible. In order to give everyone a chance, we request that you please ask only one question and a follow-up. Here is Rear Admiral Richard M. Larrabee, Commander, 1st Coast Guard District.
Scary. Good afternoon. At about 02:15 this morning, Coast Guard Operations Center at Group Woods Hole in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, received a telephone call from a family friend indicating that John F. Kennedy, his wife Carolyn Bessette, and his sister-in-law Lauren Bessette, who had earlier departed from Caldwell Airport in Fairfield, New Jersey, were late in arriving at Martha's Vineyard. Upon that notification, we immediately contacted the FAA, who started an aggressive communication search of their system, including other airfields, their communication centers, as well as their flight notification system. At the same time, the FAA contacted the U.S. Air Force Rescue Coordination Center at Langley Air Force Base, who coordinates these types of incidents in the case of overdue aircraft, and they begin their procedures as far as their search was concerned. These types of searches in the alert phase begin with this kind of effort. It's a communication search, it's to confirm information, it's to check flight plans and those types of things. At about 03:30, the Air Force got a positive hit on an ELT, a 121.5 EPIRB going off over land on the northern portion of Long Island. To be safe, they contacted us and asked us to get a boat underway, and we did an extensive search of the northern portion of Long Island from about 03:30 until about 06:30 this morning with negative results. At about 7:30 this morning, we began a more aggressive search using Coast Guard and Air Force assets, coordinated out of this office here in Boston, deployed a Coast Guard HU-25 to search Long Island Sound, deployed 2 Coast Guard H-60s to search the area between Martha's Vineyard and Montauk, Long Island, and then deployed an Air Force C-130 to search the southern portion of Long Island. At this point, we didn't have any better information because we did not have a flight plan. We had a time of departure, but did not have any other good information, and so we found ourselves searching a very large area. As the morning went on, and as we coordinated our efforts with both the Air Force and the FAA, it became apparent that with the ability to go back and review radar information, that we were able to narrow down the focus of our search. And by about 1 o'clock this afternoon, we had narrowed that focus down to an area of about 17 miles southwest of Martha's Vineyard, consistent with the kind of flight path that we would expect flying VFR from Caldwell, New Jersey to Martha's Vineyard. At about that same time, we got reports of debris being found on the beach by the state police, and we have since confirmed that some of that debris has come from the aircraft. So we've been able to narrow our search now down to the area around Martha's Vineyard. We currently have a number of Coast Guard surface assets, 1 Coast Guard H-60 and 2 Air Force H-60s, extensively searching the area south of but around Martha's Vineyard. And we will continue to do that until we run out of light tonight. It's also my intention to use one of NOAA's research vessels, the Rudy, a vessel that has good capability in terms of subsurface search, and they got underway earlier this afternoon and should be in the area sometime between 6 and 8 o'clock tonight, and we will immediately deploy them. I've also asked NOAA to provide some of their oceanographic expertise to us, and we have a NOAA officer who is on his way to this site and should be here by about 6 o'clock tonight. My intention is to also employ Navy assets, and we have gone to the Navy Supervisor of Salvage and asked them to begin to look at what assets they might be able to bring to bear on the case. It is our intention to keep searching. We are still in the search and rescue phase, and I want to underscore that. The importance of us doing a thorough search out there is what we're focused on, and we're going to do everything we can to continue to investigate the current information on future debris and to continue to search for survivors. I have covered, I think, as much as I can in a statement, and now I'm very willing to take some questions.
Admiral, earlier in your statements, or Lieutenant Jones' statements, there was reference to an identifying mark on a suitcase that indicated it belonged to one of the passengers on this plane, and the indication was you were reluctant to release that name until next of kin had been notified. And I would ask you now, have next of kin been notified, and does the fact that you're doing that indicate that the presumption is this person has been killed in this crash and that perhaps the others have as well?
Well, let me first say that we are in very close contact with the next of kin, with the Kennedy family, and have been all day. They have been apprised of the situation all along. I can't tell you personally the name on the tag, but I can tell you that we have confirmed that that luggage was from this flight. And that's all I'll say about that. I won't speculate as to any further information. We're simply still searching, and we are mindful of our responsibilities, and we're going to vigorously continue our search through the rest of the day.
And as a follow-up, sir, how hopeful are you, or what hope remains, that you might actually find survivors? And in the same token, would this have been easier had a flight plan been, in fact, filed?
I have been in close contact with the FAA all day. My understanding is that on a flight of this nature, that the procedures that Mr. Kennedy followed were normal procedures. Not following a flight plan is not an unusual event. Flying VFR from Caldwell to New Jersey to Martha's Vineyard under the conditions that existed last night is a normal occurrence. And so from our perspective, we're treating this like any other case where we're searching for people that possibly have survived this kind of an incident.
You've had the opportunity.
That you've been in contact with the Kennedy family. Can you give us some sense as to how they're dealing with this, what their reaction has been as they keep getting updated as to what they're finding?
I'd only be speculating. I can tell you that obviously there's a great deal of concern. We have tried to keep them as informed as we possibly can without speculating on what's going on. They have been very understanding and very appreciative of what we're doing, and I would say right now we're all doing everything we can, and certainly very concerned about where we are.
You've had the opportunity to talk to the FAA.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You mentioned a moment ago that the debris was found about 100 yards off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. I would imagine the waves and the tidal movement has moved that quite a distance. So are you starting from ground zero, given the fact there's been no emergency beacon to help you pinpoint what the plane may be?
Well, we're not starting from ground zero if you consider that this morning at 7:30 we were searching an area from Caldwell, New Jersey to Martha's Vineyard. We've narrowed the area down considerably. We feel like right now we're doing everything we possibly can in terms of searching that area completely. There are indications that there may be some more debris out there. The procedure is that aircraft are looking for that debris. When they spot a piece of debris, it's being picked up by a Coast Guard surface asset. All of that will be brought back and investigated. And right now, we think we're searching in the right area.
Admiral, George Esper from the AP. I know it's early, but is there any indication of what might have happened here? Or any weather factors? You mentioned you were in touch with the FAA all day.
Yes.
Is there anything?
None that I'm aware of. We've no indications of problems with weather or equipment. Everything that we've talked about in terms of procedures followed by Mr. Kennedy were considered to be normal operations for that type of a trip. So there is no indication from what we can see that there was anything out of the ordinary.
You spoke with the FAA. Was there any indication that there was actual radio contact as well as radar? And what have you learned more about the radar?
The only positive piece of information in terms of position and time is the time that they departed from Caldwell. To my knowledge, and I think you'd have to go back to your FAA sources, there was no radio contact with the aircraft. And that, I don't think, is unusual considering the visual flight rules that they were flying under.
Can you give us an idea of the scope of the search, please? How many boats were involved? How many square
what?
miles? How many people involved?
I mentioned some of the assets that we originally had involved in this. We currently have Coast Guard H-60 from Cape Cod, 2 H-60s from the Air National Guard on Long Island, the Coast Guard cutter Hammerhead, one 41-foot utility boat, 2 rigid hull inflatables, one of our 47-foot motor lifeboats. The Point Wells, one of our 82-footers, is underway now for the scene. So it's a fairly extensive surface fleet that we've got out there. My job is not only to put them out there, but to sustain that kind of an operation. And right now, we think we have about everything we can use out there. We've gotten a tremendous amount of cooperation from NOAA and other agencies, and right now we're looking for some special equipment to prosecute this case a little bit further.
Where will the NOAA boat come from?
The Rudy is one of their research vessels.
I'm sorry, could you spell it?
I believe it's
RUDE. Okay.
RUDE. It was in Montauk, Long Island this morning. They contacted us and said they were available, and earlier this afternoon we asked them to get underway. They got underway about 3 o'clock this afternoon and should be on scene somewhere between 8 and 9 tonight.
Its capabilities?
My understanding is that they have side scan sonar and have a capability of searching the area. The water depths in that area range anywhere from perhaps 20 feet to 100 feet of water, so we're not talking about significantly deep water. And the currents in that area, we've been through a couple of tidal cycles, but range in the area of 1 to 2 knots. So we're going to see some movement, but not real serious current problems.
Admiral, judging from where the debris was found and judging from your knowledge of tides and currents, can you backtrack anything at all to say how far that debris could have traveled from point A to point B?
I'd be speculating.
Well, you must have
The best indication we have is that the best position we had was 17 miles west of Martha's Vineyard.
17 miles from what point? Is that from like an FAA beacon?
Yes.
On whereabouts on the island is Big Island?
It's the airfield is in the middle of Martha's Vineyard. And so it's an area about 17 miles off of Gay Head.
So southwest from that beacon?
Correct.
Or south-southwest, or what kind of position do you have off?
My understanding is that the normal flight path under the conditions that existed last night with a wind blowing out of the southwest would be flying from from west to east, and then flying along the south coast of Martha's Vineyard, making a left turn into the field and landing to the west.
You mentioned that you'll be going in as long as light allows you to go, but if you have sonar capabilities, and I don't know what else NOAA will do.
No, we will continue to use them tonight. That would be my plan.
And that's the subsurface vessel that you were talking about?
You'll be at this all night.
Area of water, what size is the grade that you're looking at? How many square miles of water do you have to search? And is this search right now visual until you get the high-tech boats?
Right now, it is visual. We have a debris field that really is the center of our search, but we're searching an area probably from Woods Hole south about 10 to 15 miles south of Martha's Vineyard.
How many square miles roughly is that, would you say?
I'm going to have to get back to you. I'd just be guessing.
Can you tell us about what other debris was found since the last update? And were you able to get the folks off the beach at Gay Head? We understand that you were trying to do that.
Yeah, the local police have been able to do that. The debris that we are finding, and I can't characterize it any more accurately than that right now, is debris that's floating. It's being spotted by aircraft, and it's being picked up by Coast Guard assets and brought in so that we can better determine exactly what it is.
We have time for two more questions.
What's the odds of finding any survivors in view of they had no flotation device?
I can only tell you that each one of these cases is different, and I can tell you miraculous stories about people surviving. I can tell you that in previous cases like this, we've searched as many as 3 or 4 days. We're not ready to give up on this yet, and we're going to continue to focus on search and rescue.
What are the search conditions out there? I mean, good, bad?
It's hot, it's a little hazy, but the search conditions are good for what we're doing right now, and so the weather really is not a factor for us. We're going to run out of light. That's probably the biggest thing.
Is this search different, given the prominence of the people involved? Is the number of assets involved, or the involvement of the Air Force or these other parties, is that any different as a result of who's involved
The procedure that I described earlier, our notifying the FAA doing an extensive communication search, the Air Force being notified, all of that is routine. When we started this search this morning, we started over a fairly extensive area covering an area 25 to 30 miles south of Long Island, all of Long Island Sound, all of Nantucket Sound and Martha's Vineyard. As the time has allowed us to focus on better analysis of radar data, we've been able to focus that down, and now with debris, we've got an area that we think we're confident about. So I would say that up until now, we have done exactly what we would have done in any case like this.
Is it unusual for a plane not to have an emergency beacon go off after it crashes?
I'm not an expert in aviation safety, and I couldn't speculate as to exactly what happened. I wish I could do that, but I think probably our FAA sources would be a better place to go for
And I would
that.
imagine if you had an emergency beacon, that would make the search much easier because you'd have a focal point to begin with, I would think.
It's always better when you have that kind of capability. We don't have it in this case, but we do have debris, and that has helped us to focus this.
How much debris are you finding right now?
I can't give you a specific answer. Probably in the next couple of hours I can be a little bit more definitive about that, and all I can say now is that I know we're picking stuff up, and I'm happy to get back to you when we get something more specific.
Has the area where you...
We have to get Admiral Larrabee back upstairs to leading the operation.
We have another press conference? Is there something scheduled?
When it appears that we have something significant to say, we will. I want to emphasize that that we're trying to put out accurate, timely information to you. At the same time, obviously, we're very sensitive to the families involved and have a real obligation to them, and we're taking that responsibility very seriously. We will provide you with the best information we have as soon as we have it, considering those kind of factors, and I appreciate your sensitivity to this. Thanks, everybody.
Live from Boston, what the Coast Guard knows and what it's prepared to tell. Good evening. Divers today found the bodies of John Kennedy, his wife, and her sister in the wreckage of his plane at the bottom of the ocean off Martha's Vineyard. In a day of fast-breaking developments, recovery teams got to work retrieving remains and wreckage. A memorial mass was set for Friday in New York. The President and the First Lady will be there. And the Kennedy family made plans for a possible burial at sea. CBS's coverage begins with Byron Pitts on Martha's Vineyard. Byron?
Dan, it took nearly 5 days of searching with 6 ships and more than 20 divers. But finally, this ordeal for 2 families and the nation is over. Within a few hundred yards of where authorities believe Kennedy's plane hit the water, divers from the Navy ship USS Grasp found all 3 bodies and the fuselage at the bottom of the sea. With the help of an underwater camera, John Kennedy Jr.'s body was reportedly found first last night, still in the plane's cabin. His wife and sister-in-law were not located until today. This afternoon, Senator Ted Kennedy, his 2 sons, Congressman Patrick Kennedy and Ted Kennedy Jr., went out to the crash site to see for themselves the fate of their loved ones. The gruesome end of a search that started Saturday with Coast Guard cutters and Navy ships covering some 9,000 square miles of dark, deep ocean between Rhode Island and Martha's Vineyard. It all ended 7 miles southwest of Gay Head, what should have been only minutes from the Martha's Vineyard airport. Here in the recovery area, the water is at least 100 feet deep. Visibility on the ocean bottom is said to be no more than 6 to 8 feet. That's just about twice the length of my arm. Difficult conditions for divers to work in, making their recovery efforts slow and tedious.
And they've got about a 15-minute dive time to go down, do their job, come up. So
John Blackadar is chief of a local police dive team. He says recovering the victims is the first priority.
They know they can get in there, get on harness, or cut the seat belts and put the victim in a body bag and bring the person to the surface. That's what they would do without bringing the whole aircraft up.
CBS News has learned divers will try and remove the bodies tonight. Then they'll be sent on to Cape Cod for autopsy. Dan?
All right, we know there have been some erroneous reports in other quarters today about the bodies already being up, or Senator Kennedy and his son still out there tonight?
Yes, Dan, it's our understanding that the senator and his 2 sons are still aboard ship. The expectation is they will likely arrive back with the bodies to the mainland for autopsy.
Byron Pitts on Martha's Vineyard, thanks. As soon as word came that the remains had been discovered, the Kennedy and Bessette families began making plans for memorial services and funerals. For the latest on that, we go now to CBS News correspondent Elizabeth Caledon in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. Elizabeth?
Dan, with the finality of finding bodies comes the finality of planning memorial services and talk of a burial at sea. Here's what we know tonight. A joint service for both John and Caroline will be held Friday morning at 11 o'clock at St. Thomas More Church on Manhattan's Upper East Side. That's where John's mother, Jackie Onassis, often worshipped. A separate service will be held for Lauren Bessette on Saturday night at 7 p.m. at Christ Church in Greenwich, Connecticut, the town where the Bessette girls both grew up. Both of those services will be private. Now, Dan, CBS News has also learned that Senator Ted Kennedy has requested and the Navy has granted a burial at sea for John. Now, this is an honor that the Navy affords civilians if they determine that the person has made outstanding contributions to the country, and John Kennedy's charitable work apparently qualified. The USS Briscoe has been detained by the Navy tonight and is available to the Kennedys should they decide to use it, but we should emphasize, Dan, that there has been no final decision made by the Kennedys about a burial at sea, and there have been no requests from the Bessette family for a burial at sea, although the Navy does say that if such a request is made, it will most certainly be granted. Dan?
Elizabeth Caledon. Investigators trying to determine the cause of the Kennedy plane crash hope the wreckage of the aircraft will provide more clues. CBS's Bob Orr is following that part of the story in Washington. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, Dan, the recovery operation now, frankly, is moving with surprising speed. The wreckage site, it appears, to be concentrated in a very small area, and investigators say they hope to recover most of the airplane as early as tonight. Underwater search vehicles equipped with cameras provided investigators with their first look at what's left of the Kennedy airplane. And sources say the Piper Saratoga is badly broken apart. CBS News has been told the fuselage of the plane is badly crushed. The engine is separated from the rest of the airplane. At least part of the tail is missing. And sources say one of the wings is broken off, apparently from the high-speed impact with the water. Investigators will use the physical evidence to help solve the crash. Here's what they will be looking for. The cockpit instruments. Depending on how the plane crashed, they may reveal the plane's speed and angle at the time of impact. The engine and propeller may be able to conclusively rule out an engine failure. And investigators will study so-called flight control surfaces, like ailerons, flaps, and the plane's rudder, for any signs of structural or mechanical failure.
But the radar data has already painted a very clear picture for investigators. It suggests that Kennedy, an inexperienced pilot facing challenging conditions at night, lost control of the plane, sending it into a fatal dive. Dan?
Bob Orr in Washington. President Clinton today defended the costly and unusual search and recovery operation. CBS News correspondent Scott Pelley has more about that tonight from the White House. Scott?
Dan, the president has been following the recovery closely today, and in a news conference this afternoon, he acknowledged that he ordered the search to go on longer than it normally would have.
Because of the role of the Kennedy family in our national lives and because of the enormous losses that they have sustained in our lifetimes, I thought it was appropriate to give them a few more days. And if anyone believes that was wrong, the Coast Guard is not at fault. I am. It was because I thought it was the right thing to do.
In the East Room, decorated by Jackie Kennedy, Mr. Clinton recalled a tour that he gave JFK Jr. and his wife more than a year ago.
And I showed him some of my the memorabilia that I had from his father's service. I have a picture of his father speaking to the Irish Parliament and a number of other things which he thought was very interesting. I think that he really wanted to kind of come to terms with all of it.
Is there anything that Mr. Kennedy said to you that night that particularly struck you?
The thing that struck me was I thought he said he was glad to be back. I'm glad he had the chance to come back here one more time and see the residents and know where he was when he was a little boy. I'm glad he did that. I'm grateful that that happened.
The president and the first lady will attend the memorial in New York on Friday. Dan?
Scott Pelley at the White House.